Hello everyone and welcome to The Good Old Gamer. So sorry for the delay on this video. Over the weekend, my son Gabriel decided, hey, it's time to show up. So he's here, he's healthy, he's doing very, very well, and I want to thank all of you guys out there for your well wishes. All right, so in the last video, we took a look at the Intel Core i3-12100 and i5-12400 in CPU-bound scenarios, meaning we were using an RTX 3090 and we were using 1080p high with scaled down resolution. So this way we had 100% load put on the CPU. So we could see the differences between these sub $200 CPUs. Now today we're gonna be adding in AMD into the mix. So we're gonna be using the Ryzen 5 5600, which is definitely the best option from AMD right now. And we're also gonna be taking a look at the Ryzen 7 5700G. Now that's basically going to supplement something like a Ryzen 5 5500 or 5600G, as the performance of the extra cores, as we've seen in previous videos, doesn't make that big of a difference. And that right there is technically the least expensive CPU from AMD right now on AM4 with Zen 3. So I wanted to add that in, but I'm super excited. We're gonna see the sub $200 CPU market, who's the best, who's providing the best value, and which one makes the most sense for you. But before we get into it, today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for anyone who loves learning and wants to explore their creativity and learn new skills. Invest in yourself and your personal growth. Benefits of Skillshare are it's an ad-free platform, so you can stay in your zone while exploring your new skills. New and premium classes are launched each and every week, so there's always something new to discover. And the entire catalog is now available with subtitles in Spanish, French, Portuguese, and German. I've worked with and used Skillshare for quite some time now. As you guys may have noticed, my B-roll in my videos is substantially better than what it used to be. And much of that has to do with taking the classes on Skillshare in photography and videography, such as Cinematography Basics, Understanding Filmmaking Style by Zach Mulligan. So if you're interested in upping your game or learning something new, I have a special offer for you. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the video description will get 1 month free trial of Skillshare. So don't wait and go ahead and take advantage of this limited time offer here today. So before we get into the benchmarks, I do want to go over my adventures using the 5700G. So one of the members, Denver1G1, thank you so much. He sent one over for me for testing, and he actually has one, can run at a 2466 F clock with DDR4 4933 in 1-to-1. And I figured, hey, at that ratio, this might actually be a very good chip. Thinking of something like an R5 5500 if it can get to that level. So I got it. It did not work at all. I could barely get to 4400. So abusing Amazon a little bit, we returned it to see if maybe it was the CPU. Second 5700G came in, and that was actually even a little bit worse. So that was very discouraging. Now he's using an ITX board, which only has 2 DIMM slots or 1 DIMM slot per channel. So I ended up picking up a cheap B550 ITX board to test this out for myself. And it still couldn't get anywhere near those numbers. It was horribly unstable, and honestly, I just didn't know what was going on. Now, he went ahead and tested on non-ITX boards, and he couldn't get them to overclock either. So it seems like his combination of motherboard and chip gets him to that maximum level. Now, others have achieved 2500 F clocks on the Cezanne-based Zen 3 chips. So it's technically possible, but it seems horribly unlikely. So in this particular scenario, I don't even have overclocked numbers because honestly, I couldn't get it to a level where it would be competitive. And the stock numbers were so discouraging, which you will see here in a second. I cannot recommend these CPUs for any gamer. You're going to be losing out on a ton of performance, and you're much better off spending a few dollars more on a 5600. So we're only going to be taking a look at the stock numbers, and when you look at those, you're going to be able to compare where they are compared to everything else and be like, yeah, even if you did have it overclocked, it just isn't going to compete that well. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and check out these benchmarks. All right, so kicking things off with Borderlands 3, this is 1080p high 50% scaling, so this way we're not GPU limited. All right, so if we take a look at this, you can see the 5700G with 3200C16 or stock. As I polled you guys said 3200 is stock in your eyes. So anyways, that comes in at 121 FPS on average and 83 on the 1% low. Now, we're just going to jump straight up to the 5600, and you can kind of see why I was saying don't even worry about these. They're just not worth it, because even with the same 3200 C16, this gets 165 FPS on average and 105 on the 1% low. So instead, we're just going to focus on the 5600, as this is the real competitor from AMD for these other parts. So anyways, the 5600, as mentioned, 165 and 105 on the 1% low. That matches the 12100 stock at 105. But when overclocked and tuned, we have 127 on the 1% low compared to 119. So it takes a lead there and actually beats out the 12400 at 125. Next up is Cyberpunk 2077. We have on the stock 5600, 135 FPS on average, and 84 on the 1% low. When overclocked and tuned, that comes in at 168 FPS on average and 111 on the 1% low. So this is another great example of why you want Samsung B-Die, and you want to take the time to tune and overclock, because that's a massive increase. Now, compared to the Intel chips here, we have the 12100's 1% low at stock, matching the 5600 at stock, and the 12400 pulling way ahead at 99 when in stock configuration. Now, compared to tuned, we have 114 on the 1% low for the 12400, overtaking the overclocked 5600 by a little bit, but this is basically margin of error, and the 5600 taking a nice lead over the 12100, even when tuned in this particular title. Next up is Far Cry 5. We have the stock 5600 coming in at 151 FPS on average and 108 on the 1% low. Now, compared to the 12100, this is actually a little bit behind at stock, which comes in at 124 on the 1% low. And then when tuned, it comes in at 139 versus 132. So in this particular game, the 12100 actually has an advantage. And then the 12400 extends this even further with 139 FPS on the 1% low at stock compared to 108 and 153 on the 1% low when tuned versus 132. So a significant advantage for the 12400 in this particular title. Next up is Gears 5. 5600 at stock comes in at 164 FPS on average, 128 on the 1% low. When tuned and overclocked, comes in at 200 FPS on average and 154 on the 1% low. Once again, you can see a nice bump up there on your 1% lows, giving you a much smoother gaming experience. All right, so compared to the 12100 at stock, it's actually behind. So we had 128 on the 1% low for the 5600 and 137 for the 12100. And then the 12100 with the tuned memory, that comes in at 151 FPS on the 1% low versus 154. So slightly ahead, but margin of error. Now, what's interesting is the 12400 does not have a massive gain here when tuned. It only comes in at 157. Does have a lead, but not by a lot. However, at stock, it has the massive advantage of being at 148 on the 1% low compared to 128 and 137 respectively. All right, so for the next test, we have Halo Infinite. The 5600 at stock comes in at 153 FPS on average and 100, nice even number on the 1% low. Compared to the 12100, that comes in at 213 FPS on average at stock settings and 141 on the 1% low. So in this particular title, the 12100 is miles ahead of the Zen 3 chip, and then that's obviously extended when overclocked. Now, the 5600 when tuned and overclocked comes in at 189 FPS on average and 125 on the 1% low. In this particular title, as you guys can see here, I'm not even going to go through the numbers. The chart really speaks for itself. Alder Lake is vastly superior in this particular title than the Zen 3 architecture. This just comes down to architecture, guys, and IPC at this point. Next, we have Horizon Zero Dawn. So the 5600 at stock comes in at 193 FPS on average and 133 on the 1% low. When overclocked, this comes in at 214 FPS on average and 152 on the 1% low. So in this game, it is definitely ahead of the 12100. So at stock, that comes in at 129 FPS on the 1% low. So it's a little bit behind the 133. And when tuned, the 12100 comes in with 139 FPS on the 1% low versus 152. And in this particular game, the 152 is actually even ahead of the 12400. So every game's different. So this is actually a great back-to-back comparison. Halo Infinite much prefers Alder Lake. In this particular game, Horizon Zero Dawn, it's pretty happy with Zen 3. So different games, different architectures. Surprise, surprise, they perform differently. That's why I upped my game count, so this way we can check them out. Now, this is more of a single thread test here, and honestly, this is another one where I want to look at the 5700G, because if you look at this compared to the 5600, it is just miles behind. The 5700G comes in at 258 FPS on average and 162 on the 1% low. The 5600 comes in at 330 FPS on average and 213 on the 1% low. So it makes it pretty clear how far behind these Cezanne CPUs really are. And then when you overclock the 5600, that gets you up to 354 FPS on average and 241 on the 1% low. And then compared to the 12100, that comes in at 204 FPS on the 1% low, a good bit behind the 5600 at stock, and 222 when tuned. And that is still a good bit behind the 5600 when it is overclocked. The 12400 actually falls just a little bit ahead of the 12100, making Zen 3 excellent in this particular title, as I've been saying throughout all the rest of these videos. However, Alder Lake is very, very close, whereas none of the other CPUs we've tested were anywhere near Zen 3 in this particular test. Next up, we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and we're going to see things shift around again because, well, why not? Keep things interesting. The stock 5600 comes in at 164 FPS on average and 98 on the 1% low, and then 202 FPS on average and 126 on the 1% low when tuned and overclocked. So compared to the 12100 at stock, that comes in at 101 FPS on the 1% low, so slightly ahead of the 5600, and the 12400 comes in at 116 on the 1% low, significantly ahead when at stock. And then the 12100 overclocked at 115 on the 1% low is a bit behind the 5600 when overclocked, and the 12400 pulls ahead of all of them with 138 on the 1% low when tuned. Next, we have Watchdogs Legion. The Ryzen 5600 stock comes in at 106 FPS on average and 79 on the 1% low. And then when tuned and overclocked, that comes in at 131 FPS on average and 103 on the 1% low. So it's really nice when you tune and overclock, you basically get the same 1% low as you did on average when running stock. So this is another game that sees massive performance gains when you go ahead and tune your system. All right, so compared to the 12100 at stock, that comes in at 73 FPS on average, a little bit behind the 5600, and the 12400 comes in way ahead at 94 FPS on that 1% low. Then once tuned, the 12100 goes up to 86 FPS on average, which is still a good bit behind the 5600 at 103, and the 12400 could barely hold on to its lead at 110 FPS on average on the 1% low in this title. So Zen 3 sees the most gains in this particular game when tuned and overclocked. Now granted, you can't overclock locked CPUs, so it does have a bit of an advantage there, but regardless, we're comparing apples to apples, the best that we can do with either system. Next up, we have Witcher 3, and we have the 5600 at stock coming in at 176 FPS on average and 122 on the 1% low. When tuned and overclocked, that comes in at 218 FPS on average and 155 on the 1% low. Compared to the 12100 at stock, that comes in at 126 FPS on the 1% low, slightly ahead of the 5600, and the 12400 pulls ahead pretty convincingly at 138 FPS on average. So once tuned and overclocked, the 141 FPS 1% low on the 12100 is a good bit behind the 155 of the 5600, and the 12400 is within a margin of error coming in at 158. So very, very close, and another title where the Zen 3 chip really pulls up its big boy pants and starts competing once tuned and overclocked. Now time for the emulation tests. We're going to take a look at CEMU using Breath of the Wild here. And as you guys can see, they're all pretty close. Everything here is doing pretty good besides the 5700G. All right, so the 5600 stock comes in at 105 FPS on average, 85 on the 1% low. When tuned and overclocked, comes in at 118 and 95 on the 1% low. Compared to the 12100 at stock, that comes in at 81 FPS on average, so the 5600 is a little bit ahead, and the 12400 comes in at 90, being slightly ahead. So it's just kind of like stepping up a ladder. 12100 when tuned comes in at 88 FPS on average. As you can see here, memory tuning does not have as great of an impact on emulation. Does have an impact, but not as much as some of the games. So 88 is then compared to 95 on the 5600, so the 5600 is a good bit ahead, and actually even pulls ahead of the 12400 when tuned and overclocked, with that coming in at 93 FPS on the 1% low. And then finally, RPCS 3 using Resistance Fall of Man. We could take a look at the 5600 at stock, comes in at 79 FPS on average and 41 on the 1% low. And then we have the 5600 tuned and overclock, comes in at 90 FPS on average and 48 on the 1% low. As you guys can see, this is a very demanding scene as the 1% lows are very far away from the averages. I tried to pick a very CPU heavy spot because if you can run this 60 FPS plus on your 1% lows, don't worry about it. Your system's going to be gaming just fine on RPCS 3. So anyways, compared to the 12100 at stock, that comes in at 53 FPS on the 1% low, significantly ahead of the 5600. Now, I do want to let you guys know this is not using AVX 512. Neither of my chips could work. I tried different BIOSes and they had the little circle in the corner instead of the box, but for whatever reason, it's just not working. So this is without AVX 512. So this is an even playing field. And then when tuned, the 12100 only goes up 1 FPS to 54, so virtually the same. Still keeping a lead over the 5600 when overclocked though, coming in at 48. So even a 12100 is faster in this particular application. So the 12400, however, is not a whole lot faster than the 12100. Just lets you know, cores don't really matter a whole lot in most of these applications. Anyways, so the 12400 at stock comes in at 53 versus the 41, and then 57 when tuned. So taking a pretty good lead over the tuned 5600 if you're really big into PS3 emulation. All right, so taking a look at the 12-game 1% low averages, starting with the 5700G, that came in at stock at 94 FPS. It's not bad, it's definitely playable. It's still within the realms of high refresh rate, but the other CPUs, as you can clearly see, are going to be much better for that. But if you're looking for just 60 FPS gaming, this thing will definitely do that, but so will an i7 2600K, so that's not really saying a whole lot, to be honest. This is more important for people that want to play 120 FPS plus. The i3 12100 at stock comes in at 113 FPS on the 1% low, and when tuned, memory tuned, we have 125 on the 1% lows. So a nice little bump there just from tuning the memory. And then the 5600 comes in at 108 FPS on average, so a little bit behind the 12100 at stock. And then when tuned and overclock goes up to 131, taking a little bit of a lead past the 12100. So it starts off behind and then takes the lead, which makes sense because we can't overclock the core here. And if anybody from Intel is watching this, this can be a problem and very easily fixed by you. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, get on it. Anyways, compared to the 12400, that comes in at 125 FPS on the 1% lows at stock, so just a little bit behind the overclock 5600, and then takes the lead at 140 FPS on the 1% lows when the memory is tuned. Alrighty guys, so to put a number on things so we know exactly where everything stands, taking a look at the 5700G at stock compared to the Veramir-based Zen 3 chip at stock, you get 15% more performance going with the real Zen 3 chip. So this is the main reason why I'm like, there's no point in me even overclocking this. Even if this goes up 20%, it'll only be slightly faster than this. And in that case, it's just not worth it. You're much better off spending a few dollars more getting this, as it will overclock much, much better. So next up, comparing the Ryzen 5600 at stock compared to the overclocked, you get a massive 21.3% increase. So for anybody out there saying that the overclocking is dead, clearly that is not the case. As we go from being horribly uncompetitive with something like a i5 12400 and actually losing to an i3 12100, we're actually very, very competitive with a 12400 and beat the 12100. So yeah, absolutely. If you do not know how to do any of this stuff, I have a link down below. I did a memory overclocking guide, which I actually did do the tuning for this on that. And if you want to pick up some Samsung B-Die, if you don't have some already, I recommend snagging it as fast as possible as the prices seem to be creeping up. Although right now on Amazon, they are on sale. Like in all my videos recently, links for that stuff is down in the description below if you're interested in checking that out. Now, taking a look at the platform cost, obviously the 5700G for a pure gaming build makes no sense as it's the slowest and the most expensive. If we went with something like a R5 5500 instead, that would actually bring the build cost down to $280. Unfortunately, that ties the 12100, which is significantly faster than the 5700G. Now, if we take a look at some cost differences here, we have the 12100 tuned and overclocked, meaning if you sprung the extra 20 bucks for Samsung B die to gain that extra performance, you're looking at $300 going up to $325. So the 5600 comes in at 8.3% more expensive for 4.8 or 4.6% faster. So these guys right here are basically on par in my opinion. In terms of price, there's not a big difference here. It's 25 bucks and performance is relatively the same. Now, if you're not going to tune and overclock your system, the 12100 stock actually makes the most sense, as at $280 it's the cheapest option and also faster than a stock 5600. So if you're tuning and overclocking, it's basically a push in my opinion. But if you're gonna just buy some cheap RAM or use some RAM that you have laying around, the stock 12100 is the clear winner. Now, once again, the script flips when we take a look at the 5600 overclocked versus the 12400 tuned. That comes in, once again, it's $325, goes all the way up to $370. That means plus 13.8% more expensive, and it's only about 6% faster, meaning this makes even less sense. So this really just goes to show, if you look at the platform cost in total, and you look at the performance you're getting, you keep going down the stack and you start finding the best possible deals. Alrighty guys, so that's a lot of numbers, that's a lot of data there. So key takeaways are, number one, do not buy a Cezanne-based CPU for gaming. If you can get one for like 80 bucks, maybe $60, sure, it kind of makes sense for a 60 FPS game machine, but in reality, you're better off with an i3 10100 at that point in time, because those are about $80, and in reality, it's going to be pretty similar to what we're seeing. So just don't do it. If you have any interest in high refresh gaming, don't do it. Take that off the table. Even if you're on a tight budget, the 12100 costs the same and is way faster. All right, so the real interesting part here is the battle between the i3 12100 and the Ryzen 5 5600. Most people would think the 12400 is the real competitor to the 5600. It really isn't, because it's so much more expensive. And in terms of performance, yes, it's faster, but the i3 12100 is faster at stock and only a little bit behind. It was 4 point something percent, can't remember off the top of my head, behind the tuned and overclocked 5600, coming in at a lower price point. So I would say that either of those options are really the way to go. Now, things are always changing. Prices are always changing. I priced in the Intel systems with a $120 B660 motherboard. Today, there's plenty of them available for $110, meaning it'd be $10 less than where they were. And the AMD system, I priced in with an $80 motherboard, which you can get B550 motherboards at those price points pretty regularly. So I know a lot of people say, what about like cheapo B450s? Those are about $60. And in reality, you're much better off spending the 20 bucks, getting yourself a better board, especially if you do want to upgrade to like an X3D later on down the road. You get PCIe Gen 4, better overclocking, better tuning, better stability. It's just better. For me, it's definitely worth the extra 20 bucks. But overall, I mean, even if you knock the $20 off, the 5600 would be about the same price as the 12100, although that'd be a little bit cheaper. So yeah, I found this super interesting, like how close all these things were. The 12400 winning really wasn't news to me. It was just how close the 12100 really is to the 5600. And considering that platform has a whole nother generation coming for it, and if you're big into emulation, the 12100 is definitely a solid option over the Zen 3 based CPU. So yeah, that was the other thing that really surprised me. Emulation, if you're big into RPCS 3 especially, you need to go Alder Lake. It's just so much better than everything else that's out there. So in the next video, we're actually going to take a look at Comet Lake. I have the i5 10600K, and we're going to see how much better Alder Lake actually is, as those CPUs are coming in at about $150 to $170, basically the same price points as the Ryzen 5 5600 and the 12400. So yeah, I'm super excited to take a look at that. And then we're going to take a look at higher end CPUs, how they compare. Are they actually worth the money for gaming? I can already tell you not so much, as I have to lower settings so low just to get CPU limited on these CPUs. But we'll see if there's more in the tank there, especially for things like emulation if you want to have that smooth 60 FPS. So we're going to take a look at an i5 12600K and then an i7 12700K. And I'm supposed to be getting in a 5800X 3D. Now, the reason why I'm going to be getting those in is so if you want to buy into a platform, you can basically see what the upper echelons offer for future upgrades. You know, you spend $100, maybe $150 on a CPU now, wait 2 or 3 years, see what those CPUs will do for you when those are $100, $150 in the near future. So I think that that'd be useful. So this way you have the full picture. What's the best that the platform has to offer versus the best that the other one has to offer. And that should give you all the information you need to choose what makes the most sense for you. So, alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please smash that like button. Please subscribe. Please share with friends. If you do want to help support the channel, help me get this stuff on hands and become a member of the community, you can do so by clicking the little join button down below or clicking in the description. The Patreon link is in there and that gets you over to Discord and you can chat with me directly about all this sort of stuff. And of course, it helps me afford to do more and more testing like this. A lot of cool stuff coming in the future. I'm super excited. Got my new kid. I'm riding on cloud 9, so I'm super happy. And I'm very, very interested in showing you guys all this data because once you see it all, you go, wow, there's definitely a big picture. And yeah, I'm very excited to show you guys. So, and if you can't wait, later today, I'm going to be doing the live stream, the Technomics live stream with Paul from Not an Apple Fan. Links are down below. If you're not subscribed over there, you can chat with me over there about that. And then tomorrow, I'm going to be doing a dedicated live stream to talk about all this data with you guys. So we can go ahead and hash it out if you have any questions or anything like that. So I'm super excited to chat with you guys about all this stuff. It took me a long time to get all this data, and I'm glad to finally be getting it out there to you guys. So this way you have all the information you need to make the right buying decisions. Well, alrighty guys, that's really all I have for you here today. And we'll catch you guys in the next video.